we spend $100,000 a year locking up human beings, giving them very little resources to improve themselves. We then unleash them on the community after keeping them surrounded by negativity for decades. They then create another victim. We then send them back to prison. We kill 1 million dogs a year in the United States of America. Can you believe it? We spend unfathomable amounts of money warehousing and then killing pets, a man's best friend.
Hey, Zach, welcome to the show.
My man, what is going on? Let's do this.
All right, so let's start off right at the beginning. A lot of people know I go into prison, but a mutual friend of ours introduced us, and I went into prison with you with dogs. So I want to talk about positive change, Marley's Mutts, how you got involved in it, but tell us what happened the first day we met and where you took me.
So what I took you to was a program that was produced and created and cultivated by Marley's Mutts Dog Rescue, which is an organization I started 14 years ago. And what the program is called Positive Change, PAWSITIVE, because everything has to be punny in the dog world. And so I took you into our Tehachapi State Prison program, where we have 10 rescued shelter dogs that get taken right off the shelter euthanasia list, usually large juvenile dogs. We bring those dogs into prison to serve, train, rehabilitate alongside their student inmate trainer and dog rescuer. They are teams of 3 students to every 1 dog. So what we took you into, I don't remember what week it was, but we had not been open for very long in that specific facility. That was a non-designated facility, formerly S&Y facility, so it had been a little bit more difficult for us to start a program there. But that's what you got to see. You got to see the men, the dog trainers and rescuers of Sea Yard doing their work. And what you probably saw, if you and you can talk to this, is a bunch of rival gang members of opposite races residing in a prison pod, or at least half of one, that was filled with dogs, and that involved training and various types of interaction and coursework and presentations and hands-on work and a variety of different things. And the goal of everything that you witnessed is to obviously rehabilitate and train and provide live outcomes for these dogs, so have them become adopted. And the hope and indeed the possibility for all of our students is that they leave prison and get to enter the pet industry as a productive member of that industry, as a kennel technician, dog trainer, dog walker. There's literally a dozen positions within that industry that our students are well qualified for. And a lot of our guys aren't involved in dog training, as you know. They don't want to continue on with this for the rest of their life. So, but for those men, they're getting empathy training. They're learning how to put their day-to-day in the hands of something else. So, you know, a lot of the things that, one of the primary variables that we struggle with when we're in addiction and facing addiction and alcoholism, like myself, is this obsession of self, this inability to separate ourselves from the problem. And when you start to care for dogs, when you have to put another life ahead of your own and sculpt your day around it, so this dog's trajectory, this dog's hope, this dog's possibilities, opportunity, all the rest of it, you're responsible for. It provides a shift in your empathy, in your understanding of the world, in your understanding of yourself. And a lot of these guys really need that. So it's valuable in all ways. And we can go over some of those reasons why it's valuable from an institutional standpoint, why it's valuable from a recidivism standpoint, all of those. But that's what you saw, was Tehachapi State Prison, which is right next door to our rescue ranch. So what we always tell people is if you get to the prison gates, you've gone too far. We actually share a border. We have a 20-acre rescue ranch right next door. We currently have about 70 to 80 dogs here right now and other rescue critters. And that's what we do here. With this ranch is essentially the logistics support capability for the 3 state prison programs that we have going in 3 separate state facilities. We have a women's federal program in Victorville, and we have 2 juvenile programs, both 1 girls, 1 boys, which are operated, one in Malibu down there in the Los Angeles area, and the other up here in Bakersfield.
Hey, I'm sorry for interrupting this podcast. I know it's a brilliant one, but I wanted to talk to you about your room, your connections. Now, we know full well that great things come from great connections and great rooms. Now, if you're in a room full of people that will challenge you, inspire you, motivate you, and support you, then great. But if not, then maybe I have the solution for you. Head on over to stevedsims.com, look up Sims Distillery there, and join our community of creative disruptors, those that are only not there to help you and motivate and actually give you information, but to support and answer questions. We very much vet the room to make sure that we support each other's growth. We all want each other to grow. So if you want to be in the right room, head on over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, and I'll see you inside my room. Enjoy the rest of the show. Now, Tehachapi is a level 4. Let's be blunt, it's not pretty. You're not going there because you want a holiday. It is old. It's like, early 1900 or something. It's an old, scary, rickety, dark place. It's a prison for a start. And I'm used to going with the Phi, into the yards, into the gyms, into the halls. I'm used to that. I'm not used to going into the pods. Now, the pod is what you typically see on TV with the staircase and the cell doors and all. And you took me into that. So for a start, that was a little bit of an eye-opener for me and Henry, my son, that came along. But before we made it into there was a gentleman that came up to you and he approached you. Big fella, typical yard gear, came up to you, shook your hand because he'd never felt unjudged love like he had with the dog that you'd introduced him to. Now, I hadn't been in the pod. I've got dogs. We can get into that. But here was a man that had never had a situation of unconditional love, now was in it, and it changed him. It meant something to him. And then we went into the pod, and we're in there with, correct, contradictory people, different races, different cultures, different gangs, different tats, different rivals, but all sharing the commitment to help dogs, which again, let's pick on the dogs. They're not the pretty little fluffies that are under the arms of people walking down Beverly Hills. These are dogs that you picked up that were on death watch, that had very few days, weeks, hours left. So were the big, scary, maybe rambunctious, unloved, judged badly, and you married that species of dog with this crowd of people to try and get them to love each other. Now, why?
Oh gosh, there are so many whys. So the main reason we combined human sheltering, which is the prison system where we're literally putting people in cages for decades and hoping for the best, which obviously isn't working out very well. We have 77% recidivism nationally. And then this idea of unwanted pets being sheltered, again, just put in cages, out of sight, out of mind, and crossing our fingers, hoping for the best. What I saw was devastating euthanasia numbers in our community, mainly for large dogs and large young dogs, the type of dogs I fell in love with as a child and the type of dogs that saved my life when I was forming Marley's Mutts and when I was in recovery. And to learn from an altruism or like misanthropic standpoint, that's such a negative thing. I just can't, both of those industries, the animal sheltering industry and the prison industry, are just such institutions for negativity and for loss of life and for hopelessness. And they're just paradigms of negative energy, negative, circumstances. They bring together all of these variables that kind of showcase the worst in mankind. And we're not really addressing them. We're just literally putting people away for decades, keeping them locked up in the most negative possible situation they could ever be incubated in. We're literally putting them in cages with very little access to empathy training, to ways to change their trajectory, change the way they're fundamentally wired. Like you talked about earlier, one of the best things we can do with the incarcerated is to love them and to believe in them. And if you take someone who's already been lack-loved and not believed in, and then you continue that trajectory, you're only going to make them worse, and that's what's happening. So what I wanted to do was I saw my potential in myself when I was able to create with Marley's Mutts in this space as a person in recovery, wanting to be of service. And I saw pretty early on what our student inmates could do for the animal sheltering system. The most negative variable that is occurring on a regular basis, and what this industry cannot address, is the euthanasia of large juvenile dogs. These dogs are 50 to 100 pounds. They're not trained. They're juveniles. They've been given up on. They're used dogs. They're rejects. They are throwaways. And what are we going to do with this population? How are we going to give them hope and opportunity? Similarly, with our these 2.5 million locked up Americans, are we just going to forget about them, or are we going to try to turn them, these unrealized assets, into something real? Are we going to try to really leverage their potential and see and try to access their potential? Or are we just going to write off an entire population of people? And the more I got involved in animal welfare, the more I got involved in prison reform, the more I got involved in working in prisons for the last 7 years, I just fell in love. I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the individuals. I want the rest of the world to see what I see on a daily basis and love the way I do, because for one, that's the only way we're going to face a lot of these situations, is to truly have empathy for these individuals, not give them excuses. I'm not talking about giving them excuses. I'm talking about empathy and really understanding the way this process is set up so that we can make a difference, because it matters from all standpoints. It matters for the success of these people. It matters for crime rates. And I mean, if you want to bring in a subject that's kind of unpopular, there are a lot of people that are formerly incarcerated that are committing crimes. And committing crimes means creating victims. That's happening way too much than it ever should. But it's not happening because people are let out of prison. It's happening because they're let out of prison and unprepared. So what we wanted to do is really find a way to provide the utmost hope and opportunity to incarcerated people and pets. And for me, and for our program, and for our trainers, that means going into prison every week for 14 weeks. The dogs live in prison for 12 full weeks. And we're working on everything. We're working on sobriety. We're working on dog psychology. We're working on, as you know, the Canine Good Citizen certification, which is the certification process that our dogs are working for and then tested on at the end. We're working on all these things. And really what we found is in this mutual rehabilitation, the vast majority of the needs of each are met. And when you're in recovery, when you're in prison, and when you're a dog in recovery or rehabilitation, what you need to be successful, the key variables to success are rules, boundaries, discipline, structure, love, exercise, affection. These principles, if you can provide those types of principles and learn a routine and gain structure in your life and focus on empathy, all of these different things, you're going to get better. Also service. And so that's what we kind of do is we rehabilitate both using this structure, including our curriculum. And it's just one of the most powerful things I've ever been a part of. I know that you felt it when you were in there. And I know what you also felt is that it's not just the novelty of dogs cuddling up on tough guys who are incarcerated, that there's so much more potential here, because large juvenile dogs, they don't have a choice. People aren't coming into shelters saying, yeah, sure, that 70-pound husky that's been returned 2 times, yeah, I'll bring him into my house with my kids for shits and giggles and we'll see how it works. Let's roll the dice. That's not happening. People aren't going into the shelter and pulling a 50-pound pit bull that's 8 months old, that has never been through any sort of structural training, that is just a Tasmanian devil waiting to be unleashed on your family. That isn't, so what are you going to do about that? The only way to address this is training. And we don't have trainers at shelters. And we have very few trainers within rescue. So of the biggest potential here, and why I want the world, why I'm so grateful to be on programs like this, is because we can provide real outcomes for these dogs. These otherwise condemned souls have real live outcomes because they've lived with their incarcerated student handler for months. They've become professional connectors. That's what our dogs become by virtue of working the Canine Good Citizen certification and living side by side 14 hours a day with their incarcerated students. They get it. They become professional human-animal bond participators. And we have the ability to really fulfill the needs of this huge shelter population that does not have live outcomes. The vast majority of these dogs are put to death. We spend $75 to $100 a day keeping them in the shelter, and then after a couple of months, we euthanize them. It's this insane system. And similarly, we spend $100,000 a year locking up human beings, giving them very little resources to improve themselves. We then unleash them on the community after keeping them surrounded by negativity for decades. They then create another victim. We then send them back to prison at another, again, it costs more to keep a person locked up in California than I make a year. And there's something very wrong with that. And there wouldn't be anything wrong with it if our recidivism rate was 7%. but it's 77%, So I think another thing that's worth discussing is we're never going to change something has to be addressed in terms of the environment within prison. Prison can't be as inherently negative and dark of a place as it operates currently. I understand there's a need for it to not be a walk in the park, 100%. But what we are doing is creating negative-minded people by incubating them in just pure chaos and madness and violence. And when you introduce the dogs into the yard, and you're addressing a critically important societal need with animal sheltering, by merging these two huge entities in animal sheltering and prison. But you're addressing there's so much to talk about with this program. I'm telling you, if we just took a shot in California and decided to allocate 1/10 of prison yards to animal sheltering, we could solve animal sheltering in California.
That's crazy. Before, I don't want to get too far in. How do people find out more about you and Marley's Mutts? What are the best websites for them to visit?
Yeah, best place to visit us is marleysmutts.org. So you just go to MarleyMutts.org. You can search Positive Change in any of your search engines. You can go to Positive Change Program on Instagram, Marley's Mutts on Instagram, same thing on Facebook and Twitter. And adopting dogs is very important. We're only an hour and a half north of Los Angeles, so you can come up here and walk dogs. You can come up here and participate. It's a nice little road trip to come adopt a friend. There's a lot of ways people can be involved. And honestly, until we get some more support, we're funded by the people. So this program exists and carries on only in accordance with the people's support. So we really rely on everybody. Our average donation is like $12, and that's what keeps things chugging along. And until we pass some laws that require canine programming and education in the prison system, it's going to be kind of hard to rely on those institutions to support us. But we've had some good moves lately. We've had some interest from Arizona. We've had some CDCR turned around and gave us a great grant here in California. So we are getting some things are happening in the right way. We just got to keep plugging away.
Good. Well, and hopefully this show's going to bring some attention to it and people can look you up and find out more about it. You've got a situation, and as you know, I've got pit bulls. And pit bulls are very, very dangerous if you resemble a pillow or a piece of cheese. That's basically as terrifying as mine are. But when they're unstructured, and as you keep on saying, unloved, that's where the havoc comes in. So you've got a dog there's a prejudice and being discarded, being stuck with a person that's got prejudice and being discarded, and then they get together and there's almost like a consolation, kind of like, hey, we're sharing the same sandpit here. But there was a gentleman that you talked to me about that actually for the first time had a real deep emotional bond with something that wasn't judged or using him. And then he had to give the dog away. Tell us about that.
Yeah. I mean, the process, watching these guys fall in love with their dogs is one of the most human things I've ever witnessed. I mean, if you can imagine being incarcerated for decades and really having to put up a wall whereby you are blocking out all positive energy and locking in all negative energy. You really have to get yourself in a mindset to be in prison. It's such a dark place. So when you see this metaphor for love, this actual living, breathing entity that can look at you and affirm you, and that can love you, and that you can love, and really what it is for the guys, it makes them feel. It's the one thing that makes them immediately feel one step closer to home. When they touch a dog or see a dog or pet a dog, they have not allowed the term home to enter their mind because it's unhealthy unless you have hope or opportunity. And what the dogs do is it lets in hope, and it lets in hope. It lets in the ideal of home. And so many of our guys are lifers or long-term incarcerated, serving decades. So this is a really important factor for them to have something that reminds them of home, that personifies love, that you can't show love in prison. You could dap up your buddies every now and again within your race, and there's certain interactions, but for the most part, you can't be outwardly loving. You can't receive, like, these are weaknesses. These are not only weaknesses, they're very dangerous weaknesses to embrace, to be considered soft, so that what the dog program does is it allows this multiplication of love, whereby this dog is loving this person's then loving their friend. The dogs bring a positive streak into the prison pod. They bring this positivity that they streak around, and other people pick it up. And these dogs, by the end of the day, there's been so many streaks of positivity left everywhere that the whole place gets filled with positivity. And one thing that you alluded to is that most programs occur in a classroom somewhere. And our program is on the yard in the pod. So you are amongst everything, and you're touching on everybody. You got people from the program, not from the program. You got everything is happening around you. And so it is by far the best way to positively affect the energy on the yard is to have dogs present. Drug dealing goes down, drug use goes down, things just pop off less and less. We've had real significant data-driven like statistics on this in terms of the prisons that we've been at, how much safer they are, the feedback from the correctional staff. It's really the dogs, quite simply, the dogs change everything. They change everything about the culture of the yard. They change everything about the ability to be loving. They really open up the door. You see guys starting to hug on each other. We have, these guys are sharing and giving speeches and giving, testimonials. So they're crying outwardly in their speeches. They're reflecting on their time. They're reflecting on their crimes. They're reflecting on their victims. They're reflecting on the dogs having to leave, which is what you talked about. And that's one of the hardest things. That's the blessing and curse of this program. I think about it all the time, that these guys have to let the dogs go. It kills me. I wish we had some way we could just leave dogs in there all the time, because a lot of these guys have abandonment issues, and we're getting them attached to dogs for 3 months, and then we're taking them away. And that's tough. That's a tough one, but it's real life. And I think at the end of the day, what we're doing is helping prepare them for real life. And again, when those dogs leave and they get adopted, new dogs come in, and our guys are able to rejoin the program. And some of our guys have been enrolled in it for years and years and years. And they'll be dog trainers when they get out. They will be professional dog trainers when they get out. Anybody who's put in years.
That's what I want to pick. I want to pick on that. Sorry to interrupt. I want to pick on that for a moment. This isn't just some kind of fluffy little certificate you get for playing around with a pooch for 6 months. This is a proper accreditation that people have actually been leaving and setting up businesses working with canines. You've been very successful and got a track history of people actually being able to take this out and actually working with this and developing their own trade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have like 18 guys who have gotten out of prison. Most of them served very long sentences. Most of them, to be honest, are black and brown gang members. I mean, we have people of every race that have been successful, from white to Asian to black to brown, everybody. But yeah, we have almost 24 formerly incarcerated dog trainers that are currently all working within the greater kind of Southern California, Central California region. Some of them are business owners. Some of them have employees. And by some of them, I mean like many of them. These are what positive change has been able to provide, is a true breaking of the cycle. We've had, again, almost 24. These are people who have families that depend on them, real life human beings who now have solidified essentially their position within the middle class. They're making between $50 and $150 an hour. They have a skill that does not diminish, that only improves month by month. They're able to bring in some of our guys have hired former students, so when they get out, they're bringing guys into their business that they used to do time with. And the model, it's a huge industry, the pet industry. It is a $100 billion industry. It is a juggernaut of an industry. And the number one position within that industry that they've outlined that they're going to have a real hard time filling for the next decade is dog trainer. There are not enough dog trainers. There are not enough dog walkers. There are not enough qualified technicians. And our program can address all that just from an economic standpoint. When we're talking about the top 10, maybe top 25 industries in the United States of America, this is one of them. And this is one of them that requires tens of thousands of training jobs in order to continue at the trajectory it's at. So by supporting this program, if we were to get some real tangible financial support for this program, we could be feeding an industry and providing a pipeline of directly from incarceration to small business ownership for truly countless individuals. And this is an industry that isn't bound by borders. This is something that virtually every community has: an animal shelter and a prison. So this is something that could be scaled and improved upon on a national level. And we always, as I'm sure you're probably aware of, working in prison reform a little bit and working with Defy, what Defy does is really hone the business sense of these individuals, get them incubated on different business ideas, and then shoot them off into the world to go do good and go be successful. And that's really what we can do in this program is, incubate all of these guys within the Positive Change program and then send them out to start businesses, to address different needs in various communities. This is a real solution to a real problem. And we've always been hoping for a large industry that would support the incarcerated. And the pet industry does. It was built on second chances with adoption and so on. So I think it's a really great fit to meet a lot of our sociocultural needs and really get a lot of people out of the cycle of incarceration.
I remember standing in the yard with you and my son. I don't know how many guys we had. What did we have? Like 12, 13 guys there. And any one of them in a situation could look intimidating. You're in a dark, negative environment where everyone has to stance off against each other and protect themselves because you don't know what's going on. But in that yard, no one was looking at each other. Every single one of them had their hand on their dog. They were looking down. Therefore, their focus was there. Therefore, their intimidation, it didn't exist. They were literally just going, hey, how you doing? Eyes back down again. Hey, do you want to do? Eyes back down again. They were focusing on that animal that wasn't judging them. Now, we're in a society where we're getting really, really Olympic standard at judging the fuck out of each other. And it is like an Olympic sport where we literally can just throw hate at absolutely anyone because we're having a rough day. It's very easy to do it with dogs that don't look pretty and fluffy and are untrained. And it's very easy to do it with people that have made mistakes. Now, bear in mind, we've all made mistakes, but they got caught. And again, not trying to romanticize it, some of those mistakes were stupid and hurt people. Most of the mistakes that these people made hurt themselves. And they're almost paying twice for it. So why aren't we seeing more dog, and I will say pet, collaborations within the prison society and system?
I think it's a very good question. I don't know exactly why we're not seeing more programs. I think there is some confusion within the industry as to what dog programs do. So the first time I remember pitching Positive Change, it was quite frustrating. They wanted to know, does this have some sort of veterans connection? And at the time, ours didn't. Now we have about every 3 rounds, we have a dog that goes to a veteran. So we hand pick, we cherry pick a dog that's really performed. And we move that into a program called Hounds and Heroes. But in the beginning, I couldn't get anyone to listen to us unless we benefited veterans. I mean, that's how tough it was. I would brief the program, so-and-so from whatever institution, let me hear about you. Well, what do you guys do with veterans? Well, we don't do anything with veterans. We save the lives of endangered shelter dogs, and we make sure we give these guys some hope and opportunity so they don't end up back in prison. Thanks, but we're not interested. Others were puppy raising programs, right, where they're sending puppies in that are going to be eventually working for guide dogs for the blind or canine companions for independence. So these are dogs that are going through their original puppy training phase in prison, which is very limited. You're just setting up basic parameters for them. The boundary conditions are simple, and you're just basically making sure they don't die, essentially. So people don't understand the functional. There's another dog program called Pause for Life. Pause for Life is another really good program. They're different from ours, and that it's not quite as comprehensive. But they also save a lot of dogs. They have a lot of dogs living in prison at any given time. And so people don't know how to understand the difference. And there's far more programs that are veteran focused or something like that than there are programs like ours and Pause for Life. So we have to do a better job. I have to do a better job of getting out there in front of people like yourself and talking about why this is so important and why also it's so possible. that's what excites me the most about all this. It does suck that we haven't gotten the traction that we want. It is a bummer that we don't have more support. But however, as my dad would say, we're on to something here. And if we continue to chug the locomotive forward, people won't be able to ignore it because the data speaks for itself, and for every person that we give an opportunity to rebuild their life and end up as a professional dog trainer where they can send their kids to college, take care of their ailing mom, et cetera, and so forth, they are not victimizing some other family in your neighborhood and ending up back in prison, right, with everybody in a lose-lose. So I think there are so many ways in which this is positive, from limiting violence and drug dealing and use in the prison setting to improving cooperation between gangs and the incarcerated as well as staff. Improving communication between staff is very important, to saving potentially tens of thousands of shelter dogs' lives, to drastically lowering recidivism, because these are numbers that could we're not talking about a couple trainers here or there. We're talking about the need within the industry is tens of thousands. And we have 50 prisons in California alone. This could scale on a massive level. And right now, the industry itself is kind of just kicking the can down the road, hoping that more dog trainers will come forward, but they're not. And our program could address that.
Here's an environment that could produce it. Yeah, exactly. So how do people get to find out? We mentioned your website. Let's do it again before we wrap up. How's the best way for people to get to follow you and get involved?
Marleysmutts.org is the best way, marleysmutts.org. You can also search Positive Change Program, PAWSITIVE. I'm at Zach Skow, which is ZACHSKOW. And there's a lot of ways to get involved. We're I think putting together a better volunteer kind of mechanism to where we can leverage folks who are out there and want to help us out a little bit better. Please, if you've watched this and something has jumped out at you and you work at a company or you know some individuals who might be interested in donating or even visiting prison and the program, if you want some more clarification, please just email me, zskow@marleysmutts.org. There's a number of ways to contact me, but please reach out. I love talking about positive change. This is the thing I'm convinced is going to change the world, and it's going to help tens of thousands of people in the process, and we're going to continue to save lives and help people and help dogs. And for the love of God, Steve, we kill 1 million fucking dogs a year in the United States of America. Can you believe it? We spend unfathomable amounts of money warehousing and then killing pets, a man's best friend. So we've got a real solid, way to get around that and to address that head on and in the most productive way. So let's do it.
That's beautiful. I've been there. I can vouch for the change. I've seen people that seriously are just overflowing with love in that yard. And it's not a place you would expect to see that. Henry came out of it saying how sad it was that was the most love he's seen by such open people. And it's in a yard. It's in a level 4 yard. So it's crazy. Zach, it's been an absolute honor to spend this time with you. We're going to put all the show notes, all the links. Keep doing what you're doing, please. And I look forward to sharing some time with you again.
Thank you, Steve. You're the man. I really appreciate the time, brother.
Cheers, pal. Bye. Well, that was another episode of the Art of Making Things Happen podcast with me, your host, Steve Sims. If you like it, you know the scoop. Subscribe, tell your friends, share it around. Let them get benefit from this juice. And of course, if you want to change the room you're in, join Sims Distillery. Jump over to stevesims.com/Sims Distillery, or you can find a link directly from that website. That's the room where creative disruptors get together to actually help each other become better. If you've got standards or you want higher standards, join the right room. See you next time.